So hi everybody, my name is Britton, and I'm going to be talking about how we do operations at GitHub and how you can too. So first, just a little bit about me. I am homeless. I used to live in New York City, but I've been on the road for about 1.5 years now. Right now I'm living in Manila, and I'll be heading out at the end of the week for the next place. So that's just a little bit about my background. I started working at GitHub about 1.5 years ago. And when I first started, I thought that operations was just for neckbeards. And when you think about it, it's like many companies have a dedicated operations team, and the developers write their code, they build their apps, they say, oh, I want to use this new thing called Node, and the ops team says, no way, that's crazy, I don't know how to do that. And you go back and forth, and you throw the problem over the wall to somebody else, and they solve the problem for you. And a lot of companies operate that way, but you don't have to. And this is going to be the story about how we've kind of changed that style within our company. So as with everything we do at GitHub, we try and work from first principles. And I'll tell you a little bit about why we operate this way. The first value that we have is collaboration. Everything that we do, we care about doing it with other people. So it's better to work together than to work alone. When you have a terminal and you go to deploy your application, no one can see what you're doing, right? You're just on your machine running like deploy to Heroku or whatever your stack is, and there's no way to kind of work with each other. So this is the one main value. The next is automation. How many people can deploy by running one command? How many people have a deploy process that takes more than 5 minutes? Anybody? Yeah? Okay. So basically the point here is that you should never have the same, do the same thing twice, right? If you can script it, you should. So the next is experimentation. It shouldn't be difficult to try new things. When we're talking about launching a new application or testing out a new feature, it should be really easy to just deploy a branch of your application or just deploy a new thing without having to go through lots of hoops. If you can automate the process for provisioning, it's really easy to experiment and create new apps. And the final value that I wanted to talk about is distribution. So we want knowledge within the company to be distributed amongst people so that if someone's unavailable for vacation or if they leave the company, we don't have a single point of failure. So those are like the 4 main reasons why we do the things that I'm going to talk about. But let's talk about what we're actually doing. So there are 2 applications that I'm going to talk about. They're both open source, and you can use them. The first is Boxen. It's a tool for managing developer workstations. So, and the second is Hugh Bot. It's a Node.js application for adding a bot to your chat rooms. So I'll start at the beginning and kind of work through what a new developer does at GitHub and then how they get started. So Boxen, at GitHub, most people are using Macs for development. There are some people on Windows, there are some people on Linux, but for the most part, we use Macs. And Boxen is a tool specifically for Macs to make it really easy to get started and kind of keep all of our machines in a good, clean state. The overall goal is to eliminate friction. When you start a new job, it's often that you spend a ton of time setting up the development environment for the first time. I remember my first programming job, it took me a whole week before I could actually get the whole stack running on my machine. That's a terrible waste of time, terrible waste of money. And every single time you add a new developer team, you have new developer to the team, you have the same problem. So the goal of Boxen is to make it possible to build something new on the first day of work. So what does a typical first day at GitHub look like? We have about 215 people working at the company now, and every time somebody joins, often a few new people join on the same day. What do? They get a brand new Mac laptop, Retina display, they unwrap it, and they're having a good old time, and they go and they install Xcode command line tools. Right? This is the first step. And you might say, oh, that doesn't sound very automated. Well, we can't automate this part because you have to click the terms of service and blah, blah, blah. So this is not automated. But once you've got command line tools, you've got a compiler and whatever you need. You just go to an internal application, just behind an employee authorization, and there's a web page. And the web page has this command, And this command, you just copy and paste it in your terminal, and you run it. And what it does is it goes to, it pulls down a script to a temporary directory, and then it executes the script that it downloaded. And pretty much, it does everything you need. It just asks you for your GitHub username, your GitHub password, your machine username, and your machine password. So trust me, it's fine. We're not going to do anything bad to you, but it is a big leap of faith. The first thing to do is give the script root access. So we do that, and then you grab a beverage and wait. On a fast connection, you could be done in about an hour, maybe a little bit more. On a slow connection, it could be a few hours, downloading all of the different tools. But once it finishes, you've got everything you need for a development environment. Homebrew, Git, all this stuff, Node, Node-env, a bunch of JavaScript stuff. Also, all kinds of other platforms too. Not everything is listed here. So now you've got a great brand new Mac laptop all set up for development. You don't have to worry about, do you have the Ruby versions you need? Do you have the Node versions you need? Everything is there. But you probably have some feature requests or some bugs that you've noticed on github.com that you really, really want to fix on your first day, right? So how do we get Github installed on our machine? We want to have a local development environment for GitHub. You just run one command, Boxen GitHub, and everything is set up for you. It creates databases, it creates key value stores if you need them, it creates everything. And that's it. You've got GitHub, now you can go write some code. So how does the GitHub part work? How does Boxen know to go and download this particular repository and install these backend dependencies and databases and all this stuff that we need? It uses a project manifest. So let's take a look at a project manifest for a project that I created. So at GitHub, I work on the education team, and I handle all the kind of inbound requests from students and teachers who are wanting to use GitHub for free. So I built an application that can automate all that stuff for me. And if I want other people to collaborate with me in the company, it should be as easy as saying Boxen Education Web, and they should have my application set up. So here's what the project manifest looks like for my application. It's pretty straightforward. It just has the name of the application. And by default, this kind of module format also matches with our GitHub organization. So Boxen knows to look at github.com/github/educationweb to find my application. And then it has some dependencies, .env, Elasticsearch, Redis, Ruby, specific version, and also information about the databases that I need for development. So that's it. It's just a pretty straightforward kind of declarative thing. If you're familiar, this is actually Puppet under the hood. So if you use Puppet, this is exactly what you're used to. If not, it's not that hard to get going. So this defines a project for us. So once we've got a project, we can say other developers can come and help us out. But maybe I have multiple computers. I have a laptop, I have a desktop. When the newest new MacBook comes out, I might want to get the new one. And I don't know about you guys, but I have a lot of tweaks, a lot of individual things and settings that I like about the way I have my Mac set up that I don't want to have to repeat over and over again. So we have something called personal manifests in Boxen that'll let you achieve this goal as well. So you can actually code every kind of configuration change to your machine and save it on a per user basis. So let's take a look at my personal manifest step by step. I know the text is kind of hard to see, but I think you'll be able to get the idea. So first, it's a Puppet class in the people module. So we have a module that represents each person at the company. And mine is John D. Britton. That's my username. Next, you can see that I've included a bunch of Puppet modules, or Boxen things. There's a Puppet module called OSX, made specifically for Boxen, that includes a bunch of default settings. So things like enabling control zoom, things like that, and disabling the dock. All that kind of stuff is there. And these are all pre-written packages that anybody can use. Next, you can see that I'm including a bunch of applications. So I use 1Password. I've got Firefox and Chrome, Dropbox. So when I get a new machine, I run this stuff, it automatically installs all these applications for me. And you might be curious, what's this include Chrome actually doing? Well, there's an organization on GitHub, github.com/Boxen. And there's a bunch of repositories under that organization that contain all the Boxen modules. So we don't maintain all of those. It's actually a community effort. So if you create a new Boxen module, you can send a request to us and we'll fork it into that organization and make it available to other people. So this is kind of how it works to install applications that do have existing modules. But not everything has a module, and it's not worth creating a module for everything. So I'll show you, I have a couple applications that I've installed that don't have modules. So you can see that I've got Bartender, which is being installed from a zip file over the network. And I have Sublime Text 3, which is being installed from a DMG. So you can install from pretty much any format. Next, I've got a few command line tools that I like installed. So I'm using Homebrew. The default package manager with Boxen is Homebrew. So you can see it's installing these commands for me. And then last, it sets up my shell and clones a bunch of my projects. Since we like to automate everything, the first step, which was copy this script and run it, then Boxen GitHub, that's 2 steps. We want that to be 1 step. So I can also install projects using my personal manifest. So that's kind of an overview of Boxen and how we get people productive, building things on their first day, and make it easy for people to jump into collaborating on other people's applications. So in short, it's just Puppet being used on your laptop. So that has nothing to do with JavaScript at all. But I think it's still very relevant for people who are writing web apps, who are building any kind of applications for that matter. But the next thing that I want to talk about is Hugh Bot. And Hugh Bot is a Node.js application. It's also open source, so you can get it on GitHub. And the goal of Hugh Bot is to make it possible to share the terminal. Working in your on the command line has always been a kind of private task. Unless you have somebody sitting right next to you, looking at you when you're deploying your application, or you have some other system, there's no way to get an idea of what someone's doing. So if I'm working with my colleague Danish, who's back there, and I'm deploying my application, he has no idea that I'm doing that from my terminal. So the goal of Hugh Bot is to make it possible to test, ship, and measure everything, and also to make it possible for others to see when you're doing that. So we want to be able to collaborate on that stuff just as we would collaborate on code. So we have a term for this internally. We call it ChatOps. Nobody can see what commands are run on your terminal, so let's bring them into the chat room. At GitHub, we use Campfire, so you can, we have a bunch of Campfire rooms. I think there's like 150 or something like that. And generally, we have one room for each area of interest. So for example, we have a room for ops, which is where people talk about availability and those kinds of issues, also supporting new hardware and things like that. We have a room for each application, so there's a room for github.com. There's a room for all of our internal applications, and it's kind of separated out by topic. That way you can kind of parse out what you want. The thing that's really nice about doing things inside of chat is that it's possible for people who are new at the company to see how things are done without asking. If they're in the chat room, hanging out, seeing what people are up to, they'll just, by osmosis, learn how to deploy. They'll learn how to do a branch deploy, how to do a regular deploy, how to deploy to staging, how to do all kinds of stuff. So we like to think of chat as a shared command line and bring those things out into the open. So let's take a look into how we actually do this stuff, some actual commands. So first, let's look at some commands for testing. Most of our apps have a fair amount of tests, not everything, but we strive for that. The first command that we'll look at is CI build. So the slash in the front is what indicates that this is a command for Hugh Bot as opposed to a normal chat room message. So here's what it looks like in action. So I'm in the chat room and I say CI build education web. That specifies which application I want to build. Hugh Bot responds with a message to say that he's begun the build process, and then you can see when the build completed. You can also use CI build with a specific branch of your repository. So if you have a project, this is all based on using Git as your deployment stack. So you can build actually a specific branch. So in this case, I'm working on a new feature where I'm using kind of a Mechanical Turk service to do some work. And I wanted to see if it worked, and it turns out there was a failure after 31 seconds. So we can run builds in the chat room. So once your build is passing and you decide you want to ship your software, you have to make sure that your environments are set up. So by default, Everybody has a production environment, but some people like to use staging. Some people like to have multiple staging areas so that you can stage different changes at the same time. But so we have a command called config, which allows you to set up your environments. It allows you to set environment variables for specific environments. So in this case, you can see that I'm locking the room, and then I run config education web foo bar. And what that does, it sets the environment variable foo equal to bar, and Hugh Bot responds back to me that that was successful. It's important to note that I locked the room manually because I was typing in credentials or something secret that I don't want in our chat room logs. So then I can read back the environment variables. And if I say config education web foo, it will tell me the value of that variable. If I say config education web, it will tell me the value of all of the environment. If I say config education web in staging, it will show me the staging environment, and I can go through all the different environments that we have. It's also worth noting that Hugh Bot automatically locks the room before he regurgitates what could be potentially private information. So it's really important to make sure that you don't leak that stuff. So we've got our environment set up. Now let's actually deploy some stuff. So here's how you would do it. If you want to deploy the master branch, just deploy in the name of the application. Hugh Bot responds back that it's begun, and there's a link. And then once it's finished, it says that it was successful or that it failed. That link is actually to just a text-based page. It has a bunch of all the lines of the log output of the deploy process. So if something goes wrong, you can go in and kind of dig through that. This next part is interesting to me. So how many people deploy applications to many servers? So if you have an application like how many people have more than one server for their production app? Okay, so this is a useful thing. So if you want to take a look at what servers are running for this application, you can use the host command. So in this example, I'm showing the training application, which has 2 front-end servers and a back-end Redis server. So it just kind of tells me what's there. If I ran this for GitHub, it would be a huge list of host names for front ends, for back ends, for file servers, so on and so forth. We also have tools for doing provisioning, so you can actually provision servers from ChatOps as well. But say, for example, you want to roll out a configuration change for your production hosts, but you don't want to roll it out to all of the servers at first. You just want to roll it out to some of them and make sure that you're not getting a lot of errors. So you want to do a 10% rollout or something like that. You can use the puppet run command. We use puppet for our laptops. We also use it for our production servers. So you can use puppet run command in chat to actually tell certain machines to run their puppet manifests. So here's an example. Puppet run training-fe1. What that says is the training fe1 part is a matching pattern. So before we had this list of hosts, it will match just the first host, and it will run Puppet just for that one host. If I put in Puppet run training, it would run on all 3 of those hosts. If I ran Puppet run, it would run on all hosts in GitHub, all applications. So I can kind of glob to match which hosts I want to run my Puppet manifests on. So the next thing I want to talk about is measuring. It's incredibly important to be able to measure, not only usage of your app, but exceptions and whether or not new features are actually being used. So we have this tool, GraphMe. So on the back end, we use Graphite and StatsD to collect metrics from all kinds of different services within the company. Essentially, it uses UDP packets to send counters, which increment by 1, or gauges, which say the current status of this value is 57. Right? There are 57 users or something like that, and it goes up and down over time. And the third is a timer. So a page load took 30 seconds or 30 milliseconds, whatever it was. So you can send those different types of metrics into Graphite, and then in chat you can actually take a look at those in a nice, pretty graph form. So here's an example of when I deployed the education application at one point. There were very few exceptions. Then I deployed, and the exceptions spiked. So I can say GraphMe education exceptions, and it gives me a nice, pretty formatted output of the things that failed. Another one, there's a feature on github.com in issues, comments, in pull requests, which is called task lists. It allows you to like write markdown list items with 2 square brackets and create a checkbox, and you can check them and uncheck them. Shortly after we released that feature, well, when we released that feature, we created, we did some tracking to see if people are checking and unchecking them to see, is this actually useful? Do people care about it? So we can get a look at that here. Excuse me. So far we've seen how you can deploy, you can test, you can measure using ChatOps. But let's take a look at some commands that are not all serious business. So we like to have fun in our chat rooms as well. And the story behind this next command is actually the nicest part of Hugh Bot. So my favorite command is one that I wrote. It's called, I'm sorry, not this one. This is my favorite command, where is. I didn't write this, but it's really cool. Since we have a distributed team, we have people all over the world, it's hard to keep track of where people are. So I can just say, where is John D. Britton? And when I first prepared this talk, I was in Japan. So you can see, here I am in Japan, and you can get a link to a Google map and see who's nearby. There's also another command that I don't have a screenshot of, which is, where is everybody in this room? So if you work in a team, say I'm on the education team, we have a few people in the room, I can say, where is everybody in this room? And I get a nice map showing all of the people in the team all over the place. Fitbit me. Fitbit is a little device that you wear, like you clip it on your belt or you wear it on your wrist, and it's like a pedometer. It tracks your steps. So we have kind of an internal competition within the company of people staying fit and walking around and stuff. So Fitbit me is a command that gives you a scoreboard of who has made the most steps in the company, and you'll notice I'm nowhere to be found on there. So another fun command is new hire me. New hire me, now this is the one I was going to say that I wrote. We started growing really quickly after I started working at the company, and I couldn't keep track of everybody who was joining. So I said we should have a command where I can say who are the newest people. So new hire me gives you back a percentage of people who have joined in the last month and all of their usernames. So you can actually summon them to the room that you're in. You can say new hire me and then start talking to those people. They'll get notifications and things like that. So the really important part of this is that it's actually really easy to add new commands to Hugh Bot. Since Hugh Bot's just a Node.js app, each one of these commands is just one JavaScript or one CoffeeScript file that parses a line of code. So by default, we have this like slash in the front. So any command that begins with a slash or begins with Hugh Bot gets sent to Hugh Bot, and then you can write a match pattern in your own your command file and have it do whatever you want. You can have it use a third-party API. In this case, I'm using an API that's internal to the company that shows when people started and what their usernames are and things like that. So the last command that I'll leave you with is animate me. This one's always good fun. You just say animate me and then something that you want to see in animated GIF format. And that's it. So I reserved a good amount of time for questions. So I just wanted to give you an introduction of what these things are, what's going on, and now I would love to hear what you'd like to know more about. Thank you.
Hi, thank you for that lecture on Boxen. I was wondering if it's possible to replace RBenv with RBM.
Within Boxen? So by default, Boxen does install RBenv, and I don't think it's compatible to use both of them. So for example, you'd have to rip out RBenv to start using RBM. I don't think we would support it, but you could probably, each part of Boxen is actually a Puppet module. So you could find, there's a file called site.pp. And the way here, I'll show you on the web. So this is the Boxen organization. There's a repository here that's called rboxen. And the way you use Boxen with your company is you fork this repository, or you create a clone of this repository in your own organization. And there's a file in here that's called site.pp. So it's under manifest site.pp. And then this is what actually says what things are required. So you can see like the site Ruby versions are specified. So you can actually say that you want to change that stuff out. You can uninclude certain modules. You can include certain modules. The other thing to look at when you're trying to do this is there's a Puppet file. And this actually is where all of the dependent Puppet packages are declared and their versions. So this makes it so that within the company, when we upgrade, let's say, the Git version, all of our laptops get the upgrade, right? And we can lock to a specific version. So if we need this version of MySQL, it will always be that version on all of our developer machines.
Do you know if there's been any more progress? I know there was talk about it, of open sourcing any parts of Heaven.
Open sourcing any parts of?
Heaven.
Heaven. OK. So Heaven is our deploy infrastructure. It's kind of, it's not open source right now. There has been talk internally of doing that. We're just basically, we need to find somebody who wants to take the time to do it. And then once you publish something open source, you have to be kind of a good steward and maintain it. So we've already got people who are pretty keen on maintaining Hugh Bot and Boxen, but Heaven's kind of a bigger, a harder sell.
Obviously, yeah.
So I would love to see that happen.
So you run those commands in Campfire or right from the terminal? How are they being synchronized or?
So the first command when you get started, you have to run on the terminal to install Boxen. But all of these commands that that I was showing here, like animate me, like this is all in Campfire.
All right.
Oh, actually, you can't see my stuff.
Okay.
So all those messages, it's like / new hire me. That's a Campfire room.
Okay. Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And then some other bots, they pick up this information and like propagate to other servers and things like, right?
So are you saying about how like Puppet, for example, gets run?
Yep.
So when you do like the like this one Puppet run, what happens is Hugh Bot hears the message, and then Hugh Bot uses an external API to fire off the build process, or in this case it tells Puppet to execute the latest version on all the hosts. But that's actually not that's not part of Hugh Bot. Essentially, every command here is you do something in chat, Hugh Bot hears about it, and then Hugh Bot goes and uses some API to do something else. And that part where Hugh Bot goes and uses an API is like user serviceable, so you can make it do anything you want. But the really nice thing is keeping it in the chat room so that everybody can see what's going on.
Okay, thanks.
Actually, I have a question, if you don't mind. What is the rationale behind you guys choosing Puppet over, say, Chef or Ansible or Salt or anything else?
So I don't know the whole backstory, but basically there are the people who are doing, like writing the code for that stuff, decided to use Puppet, probably because it's pretty well supported. There's a lot of existing stuff out there. They have a lot of experience in it already, and we had a lot of institutional knowledge. People already knew how to use Puppet. I think that Ansible and Salt probably weren't even considered. I would say it was more of between probably Puppet and Chef, because those are two of the more heavily used tools. But it was already Puppet when I started working at GitHub. So.
Just a question about the builds. Are they automated, or do you have to send a command before it will be built and pushed to production?
The question is, do I have to run the build manually?
Yes, correct.
No, you don't need to run the build manually. The way we have it set up is on github.com, you go to your repository, and on each repository there's a settings page, and there's a service hooks feature. So if you actually, if you're using Hugh Bot, what you can do is you can set it up so that Hugh Bot is notified whenever a build or whenever a new commit is pushed or a new branch or anything like that, and it will automatically run the build, and then Hugh Bot will report the build information into the chat room every time you make a new push, every time you something like that. So it's automated, but for if you want to run the build again for some reason, or if you want to run a build on demand, you can do it with Hugh Bot that way.
Do you specify what are the stats you wish to be collected by Graphite?
Do we specify something with Graphite?
The dimensions, which data to be collected.
Which data?
Yes.
Okay, so the way Graphite's data is stored is nested nested keys. So it's essentially a tree. We have a top-level namespace for each application. So github.com is GitHub. In my case, the education stuff is under education. And there's a bunch of buckets for each of our apps. And then once you're in the bucket for the app, you just use a dot and the name of the metric. So we'll do things like, task lists was github.tasklists.activity. So that was information about clicks and not clicks. So once you have the data stored in Graphite, you can actually query it from the command line or from ChatOps by saying, graph me and then the name of the key that you want to graph. And what you can do, it's a matching pattern as well. So just like with the host command, it's a matching pattern. You can say, graph me github.star, and it will graph you all the top-level metrics in the GitHub bucket. Or you could say, graph me github.tasklist.star, and it will graph you all of the metrics related to that topic. Does that answer your question? OK, great. All right. Finished?
All right. Well, thank you, John.
Yeah, thank you very much.